The morning light filtered through the massive glass windows of New Seoul's Archive Division as Lee Jin-yo walked slowly to his desk. The building stretched high into the sky, its walls made of materials that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Around him, other humans worked quietly at their stations, their faces calm and content. Jin-ho had been a historian for 15 years. Every day he reviewed old records and documents, making sure they were accurate and complete. The hegemony had given him this job after they arrived on Earth 200 years ago. They said humans were good at remembering things, so they put them in charge of keeping history safe. But lately, something bothered him. The files he looked at seemed different. From what he remembered reading before, stories about human inventions were getting shorter. Tales of human bravery were being changed. It was like someone was slowly erasing parts of who humans used to be. "Good morning, Jin-ho," said a voice behind him. He turned to see Overseer Velthok approaching. The alien was tall and thin, with 6 arms that moved like water. His large eyes could see in all directions at once, and his voice sounded like music when he spoke. "Good morning, Overseer," Jin-ho replied, bowing slightly as he had been taught. "I hope your work is going well today," Velthok said, his arms gesturing gracefully. "The historical records are very important. We must make sure they are completely accurate." Jin-ho nodded, but inside, he felt uneasy. "I have been noticing some changes in the old files. Some stories seem different from before." Velthek's eyes shimmered, and Jin-ho thought he saw something, like a smile cross the alien's face. "Ah, yes, the data improvement process. We are always working to make the records better. Sometimes humans remember things incorrectly, so we help fix these mistakes." "I see," Jin-ho said quietly. "Remember, Jin-ho, we only want what is best for humanity. Your people are much happier now than they were before we arrived. No more wars, no more sickness, no more hunger. This is true progress." After Velthek glided away, Jin-ho sat at his desk, feeling confused. The overseer's words made sense, but something deep inside him disagreed. He looked around at his fellow workers. They all seemed happy, but there was something missing in their eyes. They looked like people who had forgotten how to dream. That evening, Jin-ho returned to his small apartment in the residential district. The building was clean and comfortable with everything he needed. The hegemony made sure all humans had good homes, healthy food, and safe lives. He should have been grateful, but instead he felt empty. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out an old photograph. It showed his grandfather, Lee Dong-hae, wearing a military uniform and standing next to what looked like a rocket ship. His grandfather had a proud smile on his face, and his eyes were bright with excitement. Jin-ho had found the photograph years ago in his family's belongings. According to the history books, humans had never built rockets or traveled to space before the hegemony came. But here was his grandfather, clearly involved in some kind of space program. He stared at the photograph for a long time. His grandfather looked so alive, so full of hope and energy. It was very different from how humans looked now. Even Jin-ho himself felt tired most of the time, like he was walking through life half asleep. His communication device made a soft sound. A message appeared on the screen from his colleague, Park Mina. She worked in the same division, but at a different section. They sometimes talked during lunch breaks, though always about safe topics like the weather or their work assignments. "Would you like to have coffee tomorrow?" the message read. "I have some old books you might find interesting." Jin-ho's heart began to beat faster. Books were very rare now. Most information was stored in digital files that the hegemony controlled. Physical books were considered outdated and unnecessary. Why would Mina have books? And why was she offering to show them to him? He typed back carefully, "Yes, I would like that." After sending the message, Jin-ho sat back in his chair. Something was happening, something the hegemony might not approve of. But for the first time in years, he felt truly awake. He looked at his grandfather's photograph again. The man in the picture had been free to dream, to build, to explore. He had been truly human in a way that seemed impossible now. As Jin-ho prepared for bed, he wondered what other secrets were hidden in the past. What had humans been like before the hegemony arrived? What had they achieved on their own? And most importantly, what had they lost in exchange for this comfortable but empty life? The hegemony called it progress. They said humans were better off now than ever before. But as Junho closed his eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that progress should make people feel more alive, not less. Tomorrow, he would meet with Mina and see what secrets those old books contained. Maybe then, he would begin to understand what it truly meant to be human. The next morning, Ginho met Park Mina at a small coffee shop in the old district. This part of the city looked different from the shining towers where he worked. The buildings were older, made of stone and brick instead of the glowing materials the hegemony preferred. Few aliens came to this area, and the humans here seemed more relaxed, more like themselves. Mina smiled when she saw him, but her eyes looked nervous. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I hope you are ready for what I want to show you." They drank their coffee in silence, both watching the other customers. When Mina was sure no one was paying attention to them, she stood up. "Follow me," she whispered. She led him through narrow streets that twisted and turned between old buildings. Ginho had never been in this part of the city before. Hegemony usually guided humans to the newer, cleaner areas. Here he could see pieces of old Earth culture that had somehow survived. Finally, Mina stopped at a door that looked like it led to a storage room. She knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked twice more. The door opened, and an elderly man looked out. When he saw Mina, he smiled and let them inside. "Go down the stairs," the man said softly. "They are waiting for you." Ginho followed Mina down a narrow staircase into a basement. What he saw there made him stop breathing for a moment. Dozens of humans sat in small groups around the room. They were talking, quietly reading from actual books and sharing photographs and documents. This was unlike anything he had seen since the hegemony arrived. "Welcome to the Rememberers," Mina said, her voice full of emotion. "We keep the old stories alive." A woman approached them from the center of the room. She was older than Ginho, with gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. Despite the simple clothes she wore, she carried herself like someone important. "I am Dr. Kim Hajin," she said, extending her hand. "I used to be a scientist before the hegemony decided that humans did not need to do that kind of work anymore." She held out a thick book with a leather cover. "This belonged to your grandfather, Captain Lee Donghae. We've been keeping it safe for many years, hoping that someday his family would come looking for the truth." Ginho took the book with shaking hands. On the cover, written in faded gold letters, were the words Korean Space Initiative, Mission, Reports. He opened it carefully and saw his grandfather's handwriting on every page. "Your grandfather was not just a soldier," Dr. Kim explained. "He was the captain of Earth's first mission to Mars. The rockets were built. The crew was trained, and the launch was planned for just 3 months after the hegemony arrived. But they made sure no one would ever remember." Ginho read the pages with growing amazement. His grandfather had written about fusion engines that could power ships to distant stars. He had made plans for meeting alien races as equals, not as servants. He had dreamed of humans spreading across the galaxy, building new worlds and discovering new knowledge. "We were not saved," Dr. Kim continued, her voice bitter. "We were conquered. The hegemony did not come to help us. They came because they were afraid of what we might become." She pointed to other people in the room. "Everyone here has a story like yours. Mrs. Park's grandmother was an artist who painted pictures that could make people cry with joy. The hegemony said her art was too emotional and dangerous. Mr. Lee's father invented a new type of medicine that could heal almost any injury. The hegemony took his work and gave him a job counting supplies instead." Ginho looked around the room and saw the pain in everyone's faces. These people remembered what their families had been before the hegemony arrived. They remembered when humans had been free to create, to explore, to dream of impossible things. "But there is something worse," Dr. Kim said quietly. "The health treatments that all humans receive are not just preventing disease. They are changing us. Each generation becomes more obedient, less creative, less able to think for themselves. We have been studying the changes in secret. In 50 years, humans will not be able to have independent thoughts at all." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this terrible news. Gin-ho felt sick to his stomach. He thought about his younger cousins, how they seemed even more content and passive than his own generation. He thought about the children being born. Now who would grow up never knowing what it meant to be truly human? What can we do? He asked desperately. Dr. Kim smiled sadly. We remember. We preserve these stories and pass them on. We study the old knowledge and keep it alive. And we prepare for the day when humanity will need to stand on its own again. She handed him a small device that looked like a simple data recorder. This contains the real history of Earth. Everything the hegemony has tried to erase. Share it, carefully with people you trust. The hegemony can monitor our communications and our movements, but they cannot monitor what lives in the human heart. As Jin-ho left the basement and walked back through the twisted streets, he felt like he was carrying the weight of the entire human race. His grandfather had been a hero, a dreamer, a man who had reached for the stars. Now Jin-ho had to decide what he would do with that legacy. 3 weeks after joining the Rememberers, Jin-ho found himself sneaking through the archive division late at night. The building was almost empty, with only a few security guards patrolling the upper floors. He and Mina had been planning this for days, waiting for the right moment to access the restricted communication systems. Dr. Kim had given them a special program that could break through the hegemony's coded messages. She had been working on it for years, slowly building it piece by piece, from stolen data and careful observation. Tonight would be the first real test. Are you sure about this? Mina whispered, as they crept through the darkened hallways. If they catch us, we will disappear forever. Gin-ho nodded, thinking of his grandfather's journal. We have to know the truth. Whatever it costs. They reached Jin-ho's workstation and activated the hidden program. The screen filled with strange symbols that looked like dancing lights. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, the alien writing began to change into human words. It's working, Mina breathed. The first files they found were routine communications about supply, shipments, and administrative reports. But as they dug deeper, they discovered something much more disturbing. There were detailed records about Earth, but also about dozens of other worlds. Species Integration Protocol 23. Mina read from the screen, her voice shaking. Object: Homo sapiens. Status: Phase 7 of 9 complete. Gin-ho stared at the words. Humans were not the first species the hegemony had helped. They were just the latest in a long line of civilizations that had been systematically destroyed. The files contained records of other worlds, other peoples who had once been free. The Cathora had been master builders who created cities that floated in the clouds. Now they worked as simple construction workers, building boring structures for the hegemony. The Valdris had been explorers who could travel between different dimensions. Now they performed silly tricks for entertainment at hegemony parties. Each species had been broken in the same way. First, the hegemony arrived offering peace and prosperity. Then they slowly took away everything that made each species special. While keeping the skills that were useful, Kithra still knew how to build, but they had forgotten how to dream of impossible architecture. The Valdris could still travel between dimensions, but they had lost the curiosity that had made them great explorers. Look at this. Gin-ho pointed to a message that had been sent just a few weeks ago. Final integration preparation for Sal 3. Timeline: 6 months. Sal 3 was the hegemony's name for Earth. Gin-ho's blood turned cold as he read the technical details. They were planning something called the final integration in just 6 months. Dr. Kim had been hiding nearby, watching for guards while they worked. When she saw what they had discovered, her face went white with fear. They are going to release something into the air during the next global health initiative, she said, reading the alien technical specifications. It will complete the genetic changes they have been making to humans. After that, humans will not be able to rebel, create new things, or think for themselves. We will be like robots that look like people. Mina was crying now. Why us? What did we do to deserve this? The answer came in another classified document. It was a strategic assessment that the hegemony leaders had written about humanity. Human species demonstrates unprecedented adaptability and innovation rates, Dr. Kim read aloud. Their chaotic thought patterns and refusal to accept limitations pose existential threat to hegemony stability. Integration priority, maximum. Ginho felt a strange mix of pride and terror. The hegemony had targeted humanity not because they were weak, but because they were too strong. Humans had been chosen for destruction precisely because they were too dangerous to be allowed to remain free. We were the greatest threat they had ever encountered, he said quietly. That's why they had to be so careful with us. That's why they took 200 years to slowly break us down instead of just conquering us with force. Dr. Kim nodded grimly. And now, they are almost finished. In 6 months, the last free humans will be gone forever. They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the full horror of what they had learned. The hegemony had destroyed dozens of civilizations, stealing their greatest gifts and turning them into servants. Earth was just another world to be conquered, another species to be broken. But then Jinho thought about the other species mentioned in the files, the Kithra, the Valdris, and all the others. They were still alive, still working for the hegemony. Somewhere inside them, there might still be memories of what they had once been. We have 6 months, Dr. Kim said, her voice filled with determination. 6 months to save not just humanity, but to show the galaxy that the hegemony's golden. Cage can be broken. As they carefully erased all traces of their work and prepared to leave, Ginho realized they were fighting for more than just Earth. They were fighting for every species that had ever dared to dream of freedom. The hegemony had made one mistake. In their careful plans, they had underestimated the human spirit. And now that spirit would either save the galaxy or die trying. The weight of their discovery settled on the room, like a heavy blanket. The fight for humanity's soul was about to begin. The clock in Jinho's apartment showed exactly midnight, when every screen in the building suddenly came alive. His communication device, the wall display, even the small screen on his kitchen appliance, all showed the same image at the same time. Dr. Kim's face appeared, looking calm but determined. "Citizens of Earth," she said, her voice clear and strong, "you are about to learn who you really are." Jinho's heart began to race. This was it. This was the moment the Rememberers had been planning for weeks. Dr. Kim and her team had found a way to break into every communication system on Earth at once. The hegemony's own technology was being used against them. The screen changed to show something Ginho had never seen before. A human in a white suit was walking on the surface of the moon. The image was old and grainy, but it was real. Then came more pictures. Humans building giant space stations, creating beautiful art that made him want to cry, and working on machines that looked far more advanced than anything the hegemony had ever shown them. "These are your ancestors," Dr. Kim's voice continued. 200 years ago, humans were reaching for the stars. You had your own rockets, your own space programs, your own dreams of exploring the galaxy. Through his window, Jinho could see into the apartments across the street. His neighbors were all watching the same broadcast, their faces changing from confusion to shock to something else. Something that looked like recognition. An elderly woman next door put her hand to her mouth and began to cry. A young father picked up his daughter and held her close, whispering something in her ear. A teenage boy stood up from his chair, his fists clenched, looking angry for the first time in his life. "The hegemony did not save you," Dr. Kim continued. "They conquered you. They have been slowly changing your bodies and minds for 2 centuries, making you forget what it means to be human. In 6 months, they plan to complete this process. After that, you will be unable to think for yourselves, unable to create, unable to dream." The broadcast showed more hidden footage. Scientists working desperately in secret laboratories trying to develop new technologies before the hegemony could stop them. Artists creating paintings and sculptures that expressed emotions the aliens could never understand. Children playing games that taught them to think in ways the hegemony feared. "But you have a choice," Dr. Kim said. "You can accept their gift of comfortable slavery, or you can remember what it means to be human." Within minutes, Jinho could hear sirens wailing across the city. The hegemony's security forces were responding quickly, But something unexpected was happening. Instead of staying in their homes like good citizens, humans were coming out into the streets. Ginho grabbed his jacket and ran outside. The streets were filling with people, all talking excitedly, all sharing the same look of awakening. Some were crying, some were angry, but all of them looked more alive than they had in years. "Did you see it?" a woman asked him. "Did you see what we used to be?" "My grandfather told me stories," said an old man nearby. "I thought they were just fairy tales, but they were real. We really did fly to the moon." The crowd grew larger as more people joined them. Jinho could see similar groups gathering all across the city. The hegemony's security forces were trying to surround them, but there were too many humans and not enough aliens in the business district. Office workers were using their 3D printers to make simple weapons and tools. In the residential areas, families were teaching their children songs that had been forbidden for generations. People were sharing stories their grandparents had told them, stories they had thought were just old fantasies. "What's the plan?" asked a young woman who was carrying a sign that read, "Earth Remembers." An elderly man with tears streaming down his face smiled at her. "There is no plan," he said. "That's the point. We do what humans have always done. We make it up as we go along. We adapt to whatever happens, and we refuse to give up." It's exactly what the hegemony had been afraid of. For 2 centuries, they had worked to make humans predictable, to eliminate the chaos and creativity that made them dangerous. Now that chaos was returning, and the aliens had no idea how to handle it, Jinho found himself standing next to a group of teenagers who were playing music on instruments they had built themselves. The melody was unlike anything he had heard before, wild and free and full of hope. Around him, people were dancing, singing, and telling stories, as the hegemony forces moved closer. Trying to break up the crowds, Jinho thought about his grandfather's journal. Captain Li Donghae had dreamed of humans spreading across the galaxy, eating other species as equals, building new worlds and discovering new knowledge. Grandfather Ginho whispered, "We remember now. We remember what you fought for." The golden cage that had held humanity for 2 centuries was finally breaking apart. The hegemony had given them comfort and safety, but they had taken away their souls. Now, for the first time in generations, humans were remembering how to be truly free. The rebellion had begun, and it was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. Humanity was waking up. The rebellion spread across Earth like fire and dry grass. But it was unlike any war the hegemony had ever seen. Humans did not build armies or make weapons of destruction. Instead, they used their creativity in ways that confused and frightened their alien rulers. In the entertainment districts, humans turned their music systems into communication networks, sending messages to every corner of the planet. In the food centers, workers organized supply lines to feed the growing crowds of free humans. Artists painted murals on walls that told the true story of humanity's past. And poets wrote songs that made people remember what it felt like to dream. Ginho spent his days in the archive division, now working openly with Dr. Kim and Mina to send humanity's story beyond Earth. They had discovered that the hegemony's own communication systems could reach other worlds, other species that had been conquered just like humans. "Look at this," Mina said excitedly, pointing to messages appearing on their screens. "The Cathura are rebuilding their old temples. The Valdris are trying to travel between dimensions again. They are remembering who they used to be." Dr. Kim smiled as she read the incoming transmissions. "Our message is working." All across the galaxy, species are asking themselves the same question. What did we give up for safety? The hegemony's carefully built system was falling apart. For thousands of years, they had kept peace by making every species dependent on them. But now, inspired by humanity's example, entire worlds were rediscovering their own strength and identity. When the hegemony's war fleet arrived at Earth, they expected to find chaos and destruction. Instead, they found something they had never seen before: humans who refused to surrender, supported by alien species who had rediscovered their own courage. The final meeting took place in the old United Nations building, which humans had rebuilt in just a few weeks. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from Earth and messages of support from dozens of other worlds. Hegemony Counselor Jekthar entered the hall with his full diplomatic guard. He was one of the oldest and most powerful leaders in the galaxy, and his presence usually made entire species bow in respect. But the humans in the room did not bow. They stood tall and looked him directly in the eyes. "We offer you one final choice," Jekthar said, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "Accept integration peacefully, or face the consequences of defying the galactic order." Dr. Kim stood up to face him. She was small compared to the giant alien, but she showed no fear. "We choose a third option," she said calmly. "We choose to build something new." She gestured to the screens around the room that showed images from across the galaxy. The Cathora were creating beautiful floating cities again. The Valdris were exploring new dimensions. Other species were sharing knowledge freely, creating art that celebrated their differences and working together as equals. "You gave us everything except the one thing we needed most," Dr. Kim continued. "The right to choose our own path. We are not going to conquer you or destroy you. We are going to show you what the galaxy could be if every species was free." Jekthar's compound eyes shimmered with confusion. "You cannot survive without our guidance. You will destroy yourselves with war and chaos." "Maybe," Dr. Kim admitted. "But that will be our choice to make. We would rather risk failure as free beings than live forever as comfortable slaves." The hegemony forces withdrew that day, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had no idea how to deal with a species that chose partnership over domination. They had protocols for handling rebellions, but no protocols for handling a species that wanted to help rather than conquer. Months later, Jinho stood on the observation deck of Earth's first new spaceship. It was not a warship like the ones his grandfather had planned to build. Instead, it was filled with libraries of human knowledge, art, music, and stories. The mission was not conquest, but connection. "Where should we go first?" Mina asked, joining him at the large window that looked out at the stars. "Everywhere," Jinho replied, holding his grandfather's journal close to his chest. "We have a lot of catching up to do." The ship's destination was the Cathura homeworld, where humans would share their knowledge of building and engineering. Other ships were heading to the Valdris system to learn about dimensional travel. Still others were visiting worlds that had never been contacted by the hegemony, offering friendship instead of conquest. Behind them, Earth was becoming something new. The gleaming towers built by the hegemony were being changed by human creativity. Gardens grew on their walls, art covered their surfaces, and music filled their halls. It was no longer a perfect, sterile world, but it was alive in a way it had not been for 2 centuries. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had broken free from their golden cage, and in doing so, had shown every species that freedom was always worth fighting for. The age of the hegemony was ending, and the age of free cooperation was beginning. As Ginho watched the stars grow closer, he whispered a promise to his grandfather. "We remember who we are, and we will never forget again."